Welcome to Black Girls Hack, Bring a Hacker to Workday, where we want to make sure that we support all of our members, not just technically as you learn and you grow and you upskill, but also the human behind the hacks, the innovators, change makers, etc. So today we're excited to dive into a conversation that goes beyond firewalls and frameworks, a topic that sits at the heart of leadership, collaboration, and resilience in our industry, emotional intelligence. So, our guest today is Sabrah Wilkerson, a visionary, learning, and knowledge leader with over 15 years of experience driving enterprise learning strategies, leadership development, and scalable onboarding programs across professional services and regulated industries. Sabrah has built high performing teams, led transformative employee engagement initiatives, and partnered with executives to turn learning into a strategic advantage for business growth. She's also passionate about the intersection of people, technology, and purpose, and how emotional intelligence can elevate not just how we lead, but how we show up as professionals. In today's episode, Sabrah will share how understanding our emotions and those of others, equally important, can help us communicate under pressure, build psychological safety on security teams, and lead with empathy in a fast-changing, high-stakes environment. So grab your notebook or, keypad, take a breath and get ready to level up your emotional intelligence because today it's all about the human side of hacking. So let's welcome Sabrah. Take it away, my friend.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you, Black Girls Hack, for having me today. I'm super excited to talk with you all. And I want to open up by just making sure that we all agree that this is an open dialogue. It does not have to just be a Sabrah show or a Rebecca show. So feel free to jump in. If you would like to, you can come off mute. When I ask questions, you can definitely do that. Or if you'd prefer to go ahead and use the chat and type something in, feel free to do that as well. If you would prefer to be anonymous, you can send something to me directly or to Rebecca, and we will make sure that we communicate your thoughts anonymously as well to the group. So feel free to do that and feel free to put questions in the chat as well. And Rebecca's also going to go ahead and towards the end, share with you my LinkedIn direct link so you can connect with me as well as my personal email. So feel free to reach out to me if you would like to as well. And we can stay in touch. So next slide, we're going to go ahead and jump in a little bit. When you talk about emotional intelligence, the very first thing you probably all have someone that comes to mind. And emotional intelligence can be emotional IQ, emotional EQ. You've probably heard different things in terms of what that is. And we'll get into a definition in a moment. But I'd like to know who do you think of when you think of someone with high emotional intelligence? And you can go ahead and put that in the chat if you'd like to. Message me directly if you'd like, or to Rebecca, or to the entire group. Who do you think of? And this can be someone that is personally in your life. It could also be someone that you work with, someone that has helped you over the years to steer you to where you are. So who do you think of? And so far I see that several of you are mentioning someone in your life, like your best friend. Rebecca says Olivia Pope. Ashley, thank you for putting in your mother. Absolutely. Sharon, you say yourself. That's great. That's wonderful. All right. So when I think of someone that has high emotional intelligence, I'm really looking at the opportunity to identify someone that has the ability not only to understand someone else's emotions, but to understand their own first. And so we'll talk about a little bit about what is emotional IQ on the next slide. So talking about emotional intelligence, I know a lot of people think of it as different things. So let's go ahead and just level set what is emotional IQ. So it really does refer to a lot of things. I'm sure you've all heard the term before, and no surprise, it's been around for quite a while. It's actually, the term was coined in the 90s by Daniel Goleman in his book, Emotional Intelligence. And towards the end, I'll give you some book references and podcast references as well. But while we're on the topic of the 90s, anybody have any favorite songs from the 90s? Throw them in the chat there. I'll share one of mine, Belle Biv DeVoe, Poison, one of my absolute favorite songs. What about you, Rebecca?
Listen, I'm not even lying when I tell you that was exactly what I was about to put in there. I was like, poison,
Awesome.
poison, poison. Way to go. I guess that
Yeah,
means you have some high emotional intelligence too, because you read my message.
absolutely. We're in sync there, definitely. So if you have any 90s favorites, go ahead and put them in the chat. We'd love to share. And you're going to see that I'm really, really a huge music fan. Some of you I know, so thank you for joining. Sully, great to see you on. Alina, great to see. And I see some new faces, new names that I haven't met. So very excited to meet you today. Sharon, the boy is mine. Good one. Good one. Yes. So speaking of the 90s, where that's where emotional intelligence started. And what does that even mean? When you think of emotional intelligence, generally speaking, the actual dictionary definition means the ability to understand your emotions and those of other people, and then to behave in an appropriate way in different situations. So I'm going to read that again. The ability to understand your own emotions and those of other people, and then behave in an appropriate way in different situations. So that doesn't sound too complicated, but it really is complicated when you think about it, because a lot of us are like, gosh, I'm not going to say anything. I definitely don't want to go there. I don't want to speak about something that might be, get into opening a can of worms, or that's going to be uncomfortable for both of us. Or, I'm just going to let that go. I'm going to let that slide for now. I don't really want to get into any sort of conflict. So recognizing how you respond is really important. So you need to look and see, how do you yourself respond? How do you handle your own emotions? And some of you might not be self aware of that. So next time there's a situation where you're feeling like, you know what, I don't really know if I want to even go there. I don't want to have this conversation. How are you feeling? Take a step back, pause, and evaluate for yourself. How am I feeling? What is it that is causing me this discomfort right now? So being self aware and then regulating your emotions, because we all know, if you're uncomfortable about something or someone makes you angry, absolutely you choose your response. And there's a lot of us who want to say something that's in our mind that absolutely we should not say when someone triggers us, right? You can all think of someone who triggers you. It could even be, a stranger that triggers you, right? How you respond to that person is very important. And so you have to self regulate. That's emotional intelligence. But it's also motivation. How are you motivated to improve relationships, to improve communication, to be able to work effectively with someone, or to have this person in your life that has an effective connection with you? Is that important to you? What is your motivation? What about empathy? Are you empathizing with that person? And empathy is a huge one. A lot of us might see ourselves, and Sharon, I probably have the same as you, as being someone who is very highly sensitive. You can really kind of attune yourself to someone specifically. You're drawing into, like, I can sense that something's not right and nobody else sees it, but you do see it. So, for example, there was actually something I can share with you, an example. I was on a trip for work. This was like probably a couple years ago. And my colleague came in and she was really trying to hide that she was upset about something. And she did a good job of it because nobody else recognized at all. And at some point during the day, I was able to pause, and I put my hand on her arm and I looked at her and I said, "Are you okay?" And I just looked at her and asked if she was okay. She was immediately like, "Damn, Sabrah, I was really trying to not show anything. And you always know if something's wrong." And so if you feel like that is you and you're a highly sensitive, empathic, in tune person, don't shy away from that. That is actual thing that is really um, good to have in life, but it's also how you use it, right? Do you use it to help others and to um, maybe even be the mediator for some other conversation between others, right? Where you can help repair something that's going on. So that is important, but it doesn't mean that you're necessarily born with emotional intelligence. Some people are highly sensitive, and that is something where they already have some of that, but it's something that you absolutely can learn and work on, and you can help yourself become more emotionally intelligent through some different things. And this is what you're going to do. So write these 5 things down if you would like. So emotional intelligence is number 1, self-awareness. Number 2, self-regulation. Number 3, motivation, and number four, empathy, and number five is social skills. And if anybody wants to put that in the chat, certainly feel free to do that. But those five things, self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills, make up emotional IQ. And that is something that you can work on. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But let's talk about what emotional intelligence is not. So on the next slide for me, what it is not. All right. So a lot of you probably are thinking, okay, well, how do you know what it's not, what it is? How do you, I can react to something. Is that emotional intelligence? Don't let the word intelligence mislead you. This is not something that's a fixed trait. I'm sure a lot of you have probably heard of growth mindset. Growth mindset is something that is very important. That means you continually learn every day and you don't stay in this fixed mindset where you're like, no, I'm just not good at that. I'm never going to be good at that. That's just not me. So for example, you could say, you know what? I've never been good at sports. I'm never going to do anything to do with sports. I'm not good at it. It's just not me. That's a silly example, right? It has nothing to do with your emotional intelligence. But the point of it is that you have this fixed mindset in your life about certain things that you think are unchangeable. And I'm asking you to reframe that. And especially around emotional intelligence, reframe that to something that you can learn, to something you can work on, and you can develop over time with effort and practice. So that is built through pausing, self-reflecting, not being dismissive of your own emotions and other people's emotions, being able to understand, why am I feeling this way right now? Why am I all like upset and ramped up about this? What's going on? Or what's going on in this other person's life that's causing them to react this way? It really isn't that big of a deal, but right now they're acting like it is. So what does that mean? Why are they acting this way? So maybe putting yourself in their shoes and figuring out what's going on. So what it is not, emotional intelligence is not reacting and being overly emotional and crying and having outbursts and just being emotional. That's not what that means. Emotional intelligence is absolutely not the touchy feely, oh, I'm going to try to be more emotional. I'm going to try to cry or to be touchy feely and fuzzy, warm and fuzzy. That's not what it means. And a lot of people will automatically hear the word or the term emotional intelligence and immediately think, oh, that's kooky. That's a warm and fuzzy thing. That's not real. That's whatever. That's not important in life, right? And you probably have heard that before. And there is a huge difference in what that means for you and how you react, how you regulate your own emotions, and how you respond to someone else's emotions. And yes, Ashley, you mentioned there is a difference between being empathetic and sympathetic. Absolutely. And we're going to get into that in just a couple slides as well. So what it is not, it's not having outbursts. It's not trying to compete with someone who's the loudest, who has more passion about some topic, you're arguing with someone and they're passionate. That does not mean that they're emotionally intelligent, right? In fact, it's probably the opposite because they didn't self-regulate. They don't really care what you're saying because they're talking over you. So think of a communication that you have with someone that you really care about. Are you going to want to understand how they feel? And are you going to understand how do I feel about this situation? So going into the next slide, I want to cover something that a lot of you probably have seen before, the lizard and wizard brain. So lizard brain is also known as the limbic system or the reptilian brain. It's the oldest part of the human brain, responsible for our basic survival instincts. And these are emotional responses, which I know you all know very well, of fight or flight response. It could also be freeze. So think about for yourself, when you are in a pressured, tough, emotional situation where your emotions are heightened, do you typically freeze? Do you fight? Or do you flee? You go away and like, oh, I'm not dealing with this. And you go away from it. So that is absolutely something that we need to take a look at. The wizard brain, instead, that is our prefrontal cortex responsible for higher level thinking, planning, decision making. The wizard brain helps us to stay calm. So That is helping you stay calm in difficult, pressured situations, reminding you to use those mindfulness skills, telling you to stay calm, telling you to think about the consequences of your actions. If I say or do this right now, what is the consequence? If I say what I really want to say, what is the consequence of that? So, absolutely take a look and pause before you say something so you regulate your own emotions. Think about where the other person is coming from. And this is something that will take some practice to do. But think about how you respond and ask, what would you do in a situation? Kind of reflect on that. The mindfulness piece is really, really important. I'm sure you've all heard of Mel Robbins, and I have her book here, The Let Them Theory. If you have not read it, I highly recommend it. But one of the things that she does is there's something in there about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I absolutely love it. It's so simple, but it's a great tool because it will help you in terms of, okay, I'm scared to have this conversation with you. I don't want to go there, but I probably should. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And it's like makes yourself, it prompts you, tricks your brain into focusing on what it is that you actually need to say instead of shying away from it, like the flight response or the freezing. Fight, obviously, fight would be, the aggressive piece of that, where you maybe say something that you shouldn't, and then there are consequences for that, right? So while emotional intelligence involves understanding and managing your emotions, this lizard brain triggers those automatic responses. So often without any sort of reason. So understanding that part is very important. You need to understand for yourself, how do I want to act right now? And what should I do as a result of that? Right. So sometimes that lizard brain takes over and you really want to say something that you shouldn't. That's okay then to pause and say, you know what? I do need to take a break because I'm going to say something I regret in this moment. And that's not going to help anyone. Right. The other thing is, yes, absolutely. Mindfulness. We need to be able to stop, pause, do something that will put us into a clear thinking opportunity. What that looks like for you is different for everyone. It might mean go listen to your favorite music. It might mean get up and go take a walk, be in nature, have the sun on your face. It might mean doing some yoga. It might mean doing some breathing exercises, just pausing and closing your eyes, counting, breathing. Those are important things that a lot of people take for granted. And it sounds so simple, but if you put into practice every day some of those practices, you will become more emotionally intelligent. And so the wizard brain is that part of the brain, again, that's the higher level thinking, planning, problem solving, becoming self aware. And you will get there in that wizard brain through that mindfulness. Absolutely. So that's something where you need to focus on solving that problem. So I'm going to share just a short little story about emotional intelligence and how this worked for me in the past, what I learned from it, where there was actually an example that is not necessarily a good one. I will say, in terms of what I mean, is it wasn't a positive situation. So this was years ago. I was at a company where it was pretty obvious that the hiring manager did not want the position that she hired me for. She did. I was at a new company. I was not introduced to anyone. She did not send me any kind of meetings that were important for me to attend. And from day to day, I got Jekyll and Hyde from her. Like it was like one day she would be kind of humming a song and happy. And then the next day she's banging things around and she's cursing and she's angry and never knew what you were going to get. And it was very toxic, very horrible environment. What I found out pretty quickly was there was a lot of people that were laid off at this company, and unfortunately after a year of being there, I was laid off. Not surprisingly though, I was already looking to exit because this particular person, it was very hard to work with them, very hard to have emotional intelligence with her because I never knew what I was going to get. So there was one day I was really tired of how things had gone with us, and I don't know, I was brave and I decided I'm going to sit down and talk to her. So I asked her if she had a few minutes. I sat down in her office and I looked her directly in the eye and I let her know there are a few things that are bothering me right now. Like, I don't understand why you're not inviting me to meetings. You're not introducing me to anyone. You're not, giving me feedback in a way that I can do anything with it. For example, I was doing some design for learning development. I asked her if she could put her comments in the actual document online. She insisted on printing like 100 pages and scribbling her writing on it. The problem with that is I couldn't read her writing. So I never was able to do much with that. And I let her know multiple times that that wasn't effective for me. So when we sat down and had a conversation, I just felt that I needed to be directly open and honest. And so I actually looked her in the face and I asked her point blank, I don't think you respect me. Do you think I'm a dumbass? And I'm going to say that was, she just looked at me like, I cannot believe you just said that to me. Now, I'm not recommending that maybe that's probably not how you actually talk to someone you report to. But at this point in my career, at this time, this stage where I had battled a lot with this person day in and day out, I basically was like, I have to do something. So would I probably not say that same thing again? Like ask her if she thinks I'm a dumbass? Probably not. I probably wouldn't do that. But that was my emotional outburst that came out, which was definitely not probably the right thing to say. But it also surprised her because she knew that I was being very real and open at that moment. So when I asked her that, she had to stop what she was doing because usually she's over here doing whatever, not paying attention to me. And she had to stop and focus in on me. And so at that moment, we had a real conversation. And, I tried to talk with her more about what was really needed in order to be effective for us to work together. And, so I made the effort. How I got there, maybe that little bit of an emotional outburst was not necessarily the right thing. And I could have gotten fired on the spot, I'm sure, for saying that, but I didn't. And I felt at the time it didn't really matter because at this point I felt like I had tried everything. So the reason I'm bringing that up is there was a couple things there. I was battling that lizard brain of I'm angry and how she treats me and she thinks I'm a dumbass and she thinks that I'm not doing a good job. I don't know because I'm not getting any feedback from her. I'm not getting anywhere with her. I don't know what I get from day to day. She's not being supportive. She's not introducing me to people. She's not inviting me to meetings that I need to be involved in. So I just need to figure it out for myself, right? So I was very emotional when I went in there. So I did not self regulate very well in that moment, in that conversation. The good thing was is that I took time to sit down and talk with her, but I didn't really think beyond that. So since then, I have learned how I probably could have responded a little bit better, right? And that would have been ask her if she has some time to meet and be prepared for that conversation. And the way that I could be prepared is to really kind of script out some things that would have helped guide me in that conversation to not be in my lizard brain and be emotional and be angry or say things that I shouldn't in the moment, right? So I needed to prepare better for that conversation. Rebecca, do you have any stories or anything that you would like to share about an example?
Yes. So I think everything that you've spoken about definitely is like directly applicable to careers in cybersecurity, tech, everything else. But the lizard wizard brain stuck out to me specifically. One, because of this quote that said, when emotions overwhelm our ability to think, they can hijack our rational mind. And I don't know how many of you have been in the situation to where you get that 2 a.m., 3 a.m., whatever the heck, while I'm sleeping alert, either phone call or text message or whatever, for a critical vulnerability that maybe has impacted everyone. You're not exactly sure if it impacts your company or it does directly impact your company. Lizard brain is oh my gosh, the sky is falling. Oh, the heck, everything. And I've had coworkers. I mean, I'm not gonna say, yeah, no, actually, I feel like it brings me joy and pride to know that I was more on the wizard brain side of things of like, breathe. Okay, what are the logs saying? Okay, let's prioritize. Let's address this step by step. Let's get to the root cause of what's involved. And so being able to put language to it is pretty fantastic, I think, because I think everybody has had those experiences, whether it's directly or indirectly. Either you're one of the people responding or you've witnessed a response, to be able to articulate and say, okay, that's what this is. This is that lizard brain of freaking out, and everything's on fire, everything is burning. I don't know what to do. Versus the okay, let's breathe. If things are in fact on fire, where's the fire extinguisher? So yeah, I've experienced that more than a time or two. And that's one of the things when people who are interested in incident response, always being on, having that emotional intelligence of not only knowing what your coworkers are experiencing, but how it's impacting you and how you being impacted is now impacting your coworkers or your work. How that's kind of cyclical there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this topic is so relevant no matter where you are in your career, whether you are and in your personal life. It really relates to how you react yourself, regulating your own emotions, and how you react to other people's emotions, no matter what situation you're in. So if you are leading people or you are a team member that is an independent person who does not have a team under you, it doesn't make any difference because you work with people all the time. In your personal life, you're with people a lot, right? So those relationships are going to either strengthen or tear apart depending on how you work on emotional intelligence. And that is important. And I love the example, Rebecca, that you mentioned about when everything's on fire. There's so much change that is happening everywhere. Every organization, every person, and the more people I talk to, they're like, there's just so much going on. There's just a lot, right? There's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot going on in our personal lives. There's a lot going on at work. And at work, when things are stressful, when there's a lot of technology change or a lot of people change, where there may be layoffs or there may be a lot of changes to different higher level positions. Anytime there's a lot of change, that really tests your emotional intelligence. That is an opportunity for you to put into practice. I need to make sure that I'm protecting me with the mindfulness practices that work well for me in order to be successful in life. Because when I'm under stress and I'm under pressure, I may be more likely to emotionally react and say something I shouldn't or do something I shouldn't. Right. And there's a lot of change that we're all faced with day to day. So you need to be able to think about how you react under pressure. What can you do to change your response, to regulate that, to help make sure you're healthy, that you're mentally okay? And so on the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about compassion.
Can I add something real quick? 'Cause I
Yeah,
felt
go
I
right
felt
ahead.
convicted after you said that.
Sure.
Now, in that designated situation, because I've done it so often and I've been in a incident response environment, in that situation, it was relatively easy for me to toggle on and say, "Okay, I'm gonna take a breath. I'm gonna process things." But to your point of things changing, sometimes that's easier said than done. And the change that happens is in an area or environment or situation where they're not prepared or it's a surprise. Sometimes I think we have our ducks in a row, but then here comes a dragon. The dragon's not in a row, my ducks are, you know? And I think and so I didn't want that to sound in any kind of we have to be intentional about those things that you listed, taking your time, assessing and reviewing because it's not always easy. And even for the people who it seems like it might be easy in some areas, it doesn't mean that it's easy in others. And so it's definitely something that we have to be mindful of and intentional about. So I don't want that to come across as like, hey, come on, wizard, thou shalt not pass. Everybody just do it. It's even for the people who it seems like, oh, you've got this down or what have you. It does take work and you do have to be intentional and we have to be mindful about what it is that we want to achieve and then take those steps to do so.
Yeah, very well said, Rebecca. I think it does. It takes intention. Absolutely, it takes intention. And you need to be able to self-reflect and talk to yourself every day about being intentional because you can get on that hamster wheel and keep going, keep going, keep going, and so easily lose focus and respond negatively under pressure in a way that you didn't want to when, put up against something, right? And when things get tough and when things are just spiraling out of control, what are you doing, right? What are you doing to help yourself and others, right? To get there. And so I think it is important that on a day-to-day basis, make sure you figure out for yourself what works for you for those mindfulness practices. What is it that will work for you? And sometimes you have to put it on the calendar for your mindfulness practice. And what I mean by that is remind yourself, I need to intentionally do this, whether it's in the morning, whether it's at lunchtime, in the afternoon, wherever it is that works best for you. Put a reminder, make sure that you're doing that and that you're starting to have those mindfulness practices. Because if you don't do it, it's not going to just happen, right? You're just going to continue to go along your path and do everything that you've always done, right? And what is that definition? Doing the same thing and expecting different results is insanity, right? You don't want that. You definitely don't want to continue to just do the same thing, and just hope that it works out differently. You need to make sure that you're taking a deep breath and saying, you know what? This is not working. I need to get into that wizard brain thinking and figure out how I can work on my own response, my own self awareness. How do I get there? And one of the things that also helps is every time there is a change, no matter how small or how big in your life, just start thinking about how do I feel about that change? Recognize how you feel about that and then reframe it into something positive. So that's going to be an intentional thing to do because change happens all the time, right? So we're constantly bombarded with changes every day. So think about next time there's something that's thrown at you that's a change. How do I feel about that change? And how do I reframe my brain to think positively about that change? What can I do to move forward in a positive way and help others move forward in a positive way? And so on the next slide here, we have compassion. I want to talk about this a little bit. I know earlier, Sharon, you mentioned something about empathy and sympathy being different. And yes, that is absolutely true. So, what we're going to talk about a little bit here, and I do have an article I can throw in here. This is from a few years ago, but it is still very, very relevant. I'm just going to throw this article in here. Um, this is an article really about compassion as being a really strong power tool because compassion actually changes your brain chemistry in a positive way. So sympathy, can be without action. You're just, I understand what you're saying, even though I wouldn't feel that way. I can see why you do. I'm sorry you feel that way, right? You're just sorry you feel that way. Empathy is, absolutely taking it to the next level where you're in it with that person, you feel for them, you empathize, you're really trying to get in that with them. So you're crying with that person. You maybe are there with them. I'm in this with you. I'm here. I'm, taking on your emotions in some way. Now, that can be, yes, Ashley, putting yourself in their shoes. That can be a good thing to a certain point. Yes, empathy absolutely is important, but it can be exhausting and emotionally taxing if this is something that you're doing all the time where you're so empathetic. And this is for, those of you that are a highly sensitive person, you're so empathetic that you're putting yourself in someone else's shoes so much that it's affecting you, right? It's affecting your own well-being because it's pulling you down in a negative way. And that's to get past that. If you're a highly sensitive person, you have to have some level of boundary there, right? It's too much weight sometimes to carry for other people. So compassion is the power tool to energize you. And so what you do with the compassion is a little bit different. So with that, here's why it works. Compassion promotes motivation in your brain because it makes both the receiver and the giver feel better. So this is going to be something where both of you are rewarded and it signals a trigger to release. Basically, it's like brain candy, dopamine and oxytocin makes you feel happy, makes you energized, promotes a stronger social bond. And when that happens, the momentum allows us to be more socially collaborative, to be more innovative, to increase productivity and our outcomes. And so this, for example, would be like maybe somebody is under stress because they recently had a death in the family. A sympathetic statement would just be, I understand this must be difficult for you, right? A compassionate statement would be, I understand this is difficult for you. I have covered Let's say this is a work colleague. I have covered some shifts for you today. I'm going to allow you to have some time off, or would some uninterrupted time be helpful to you? Right. And so you're doing something as a compassion tool to help them. Right. And it's more of, it's not a squishy thing. It's not something that is warm and fuzzy. It's more of taking action. Compassion is more of taking action to help the person because, taking on their emotion that it's going to exhaust you. That's not helpful in the long run. So compassion will actually be doing something, they're taking an action that's helping them, and it's also rewarding you because you've now given to someone and put yourself out there to help them. So I challenge you, recognize every day. It could be even the simplest thing. It could be when you smile at someone who, looks really down on and they're just not happy and it's a stranger on the street. Smile at them. It might be the only smile that they have that day. I know that that sounds silly and that's an easy example, but that's one example. Another thing, now I'm going to reach out to you, Rebecca, and tell you I'm thankful to you because I know Rebecca is a very strong believer in this compassion area. She actually reached out to me when I was going through something and said, Sabra, you have always been there as a resource and help to other people. So I want to do that for you right now. And I have some solutions I'm bringing to you. Here are some things that I can offer to you. And that meant a whole lot to me, so much to me. And so thank you, Rebecca, for doing that because that compassion is a power tool. Compassion is something that not only allows you to feel like you made a difference in someone's life, but the other person now, it's not just a platitude like, oh, I hope you're okay and have a good day. It's more of, I'm going to do something that will help you and taking action and finding a way to help that person. So I challenge you to think of that. Think of something that someone needs in their life. And it can be very small. It doesn't have to be a big deal. It could be maybe someone that is going through a hard time and maybe you just want to come over and sit with them and talk on their porch for a little while. Or maybe it's something as simple as, my friend sprained her ankle. I'm going to go and offer to walk her dog for her, something like that. So anything that you can think of that will be a compassion opportunity for you. So, as we wind down now, we're about 10 minutes left. I have a couple other things. Lastly, I'm going to, on the next slide, I want to ask if anyone has an example that they feel comfortable sharing, or they can message me or Rebecca directly and we'll share of an example of an emotionally intelligent leader that helped you progress in your career. If anyone has an example, we would love to hear it. While you're thinking of those examples, I'm going to share with you, I do have some book recommendations and also some podcast recommendations that I'm going to put in right now in the chat.
Since no one else is speaking up, I don't necessarily have one about the someone who has shown emotional intelligence that I look up to, but I have two examples of the lizard and wizard thing. Well, it was basically one big situation, but I would just like some feedback on how I could have possibly handled that better, or at that point, you just leave it alone. What was the book? Just let them.
Yes, Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. And
Yes,
yes, that is, she has a podcast as well, and she has a book. So actually, you'll see I didn't put the book, but
I
there's a book and also a podcast.
I do see that in your post. Thank you. So my example. So this is a previous supervisor. There was a day when our system had been hacked, so we were doing a lot of workarounds as far as work goes. There were customers calling in that needed assistance that should have gotten assistance a long time ago. We were instructed to send these customers to her voicemail and she would handle them as soon as possible. But then circumstances changed to where she realized that she could not help these customers, but she didn't really communicate it to the staff of what she needed to do. So I brought the information to her and just wrote her a little note because I knew she was in a meeting, but her door happened to be open when I was putting the note in her door. And she asked me, what's going on? So I explained to her. And she just kind of exploded at me like, "Why are you sending these customers to me? I can't help them, and, I've told you that." I'm like, "Well, first off, no, you did not tell me that, and second off, this is what you instructed us to do previously, so that's why I was doing that." And, this was quite embarrassing because there was someone else in her office when she was doing this, and it was just really condescending and just it was very rude. So, my lizard brain at that moment, I kinda walked out and exploded to some of my other coworkers, like, "I don't appreciate her talking to me like that, blah, 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 blah." Some of my other coworkers overheard and went back and told her, some things that I had said where I was just like, literally just like, "I don't appreciate her talking to me like that. She's not gonna talk to me like that again." So, later in the week, she decided that she wanted to have a meeting with me, and me and the supervisor had kind of been having problems for quite a while. She was new. In my opinion, she didn't like the fact that I was lower in the chain of things, but there was a lot of her job that I was having to teach her, and I don't feel like she appreciated that. Long story short, we started having a conversation about why that situation happened the way that it did. I explained to her my point of view and why I've been feeling the way that I've been feeling. And then I also tried to get her point of view and the way that she's been treating me. But like during that conversation, I felt like we were doing the wizard brain thing. We were having a meaningful, emotionally intelligent conversation. But come to find out, she was more so being manipulative, and really, I don't believe she was really open to the conversation that we were having and trying to get on the same page. In situations like that, what do you do? Like, do you just let them leave it alone? Or do you continue to try to have emotionally intelligent conversations? Like, what do you do in those situations?
Yeah. Thank you, first of all, for sharing your story. I really appreciate that and for taking the opportunity to do that. One thing that I would absolutely do, I would continue to work on it for sure, but not at your expense. So, what I mean by that is do some prep work to go back to her in order to have that conversation to build trust. One of the things I would recommend, I see that in the books that I recommended, there's a link there that I highly recommend that you take a look at. Crucial conversations. That absolutely helps you to have those tough conversations when people are basically, you don't know what their intention is, right? Maybe they have a negative
Mhm.
intention. So I think it's important to identify what is the intention that you have, what is her intention. And I think that if you prepare that conversation to say, this is my intention for us to work effectively together. And you may need to, at that point, say, I'd like to wipe the slate clean. Can we start over? Can we, let some of the things that maybe some of the feelings we've had about each other, can we let that go and start fresh now? And in order to do that, let's go ahead and have some conversations and build that trust now. And I think that crucial conversations is something that has really helped me because it's about having those tough conversations to figure out like what is actually the intent of the other person and what is your intent, and being able to meet each other for that shared vision. Like, you obviously want to be able to work together effectively. How do I get there? And so I would say don't shy away with like, well, it's just not working. We're not going to talk. We're not going to be effective together. You can get there, but it's going to take some preparation on your side to be able to come to her with that conversation. So I would schedule a meeting, make sure that it is a time that works for both of you, and then be ready to talk through those things, but make sure that you're not letting yourself get triggered emotionally, right? So you'd have to think about how to stay calm, how to make sure that this is something that we both want a positive outcome. We both want to do that. I'd be happy to talk with you more about it if you want to. Rebecca is going to put my email address as well as my LinkedIn contact information. So feel free to connect with me for anyone that wants to connect with me. I'd be happy to do that. I actually was certified to teach crucial conversations for several years. That has absolutely been a game changer. There's some videos that you can also watch on the link I sent you in the chat. And so in the short time we have, I know we're only wrapping up here in a minute. Does anyone else have anything that you'd like to add to help or to talk through any other questions that you may have?
Real quick, because you mentioned with the conversation after you vented to some of your coworkers, I'm not a licensed professional or haven't done the training that Sabra's done. So this isn't like a authorized official or whatever opinion. It's just from lived experience. Not all of your work friends are your real friends, and you do have to be mindful for the people that you are vulnerable with. And I don't say that in a way of like, lizard brain, be afraid of everything and not have conversations. But we also mentioned mindfulness. Be mindful for the people that you trust, because you don't want anyone who would take advantage of that or do as they did and basically betray that trust. So I would just be mindful of the people that you speak to. I think it's very important to have a personal board in addition to, people talk about professional boards or what have you. But a personal board of folks that you know that you can go to, because sometimes you need that person that you can vent to and be like, oh, these people at this job, and they know exactly what you're talking about. You don't have to give them any other additional context, and that's it. And you can get all the emotion and angst and everything out. But then you also need someone who's going to be like, all right, now I know these people are this, that, and the other. I know this person was wrong. You still got bills to pay. And sometimes that is what you're experiencing is more, it outweighs any potential fallout or change or what have you. And you have to stand on your own and you have to do what you need to. But it helps to have someone who can help you assess, do a pro cons list, because some battles are worth fighting and some aren't. And that's just the honest truth of things. And I know some things are easier said than done. So you have to give yourself as many your own personal controls to help check you so that you have safety as much as you can set up at work. There's definitely so much more that we can go into, but those are the few things that popped off. One of the things that I endeavor to do with BGH, and thankfully a lot of our volunteers and our leadership are in support of that, is to make sure that we support you, the person, as well. And not just you, the worker, that you just produce, produce, produce. It's also give a safe space where you can have this conversation. And if it's a matter of throwing something in Teams and say, does anybody have a second to talk? Now, even with that, be mindful because we allow just about anybody in BGH as long as you're not a jerk. But I'd be more than happy to at least be an ear to be able to take some of that steam off so then you can have the clarity to move on to Wizard Brain. And then also coming up, we are going to have a few sessions with a licensed therapist because I know that there are additional things that come up in our lives and work and everything else. And it would help to have someone, just like how Saber said, she has those tools to help talk through those tough conversations, to also have someone who's trained that can give you the license and actual, good feedback and people who've been trained like Saber has to give you that information instead of me like, "Ayo, where you work? Let me run up on these people who are talking outside their neck." But if you need one of those people in your board, I'm willing to do that for you. All right, that was it for me.
Yeah, and Rebecca, I agree wholeheartedly. A personal board of directors for yourself is so very important. You need to have someone who's going to be that truth teller, who's going to be direct and hard with you. And you need to have someone who will spend the time being encouraging. You need to have someone who will do that planning and problem solving. You need to be able to figure out who those people are in your life, but definitely be picky and choosy. Like Rebecca was saying, it is very important to not say things to specific people at work because you never know who has your back. So you need to be careful about that. I totally agree there. You really want to be sure that you're only sharing with those select few who you know really have you and you have that. And you can even tell them, like, I'm making you as like someone who is on my personal board of directors. I'm going to come to you with some advice sometimes. I would tell that person so that they know that that's something that you value in them, that you want to be there for each other. So, yeah, thank you so much for opening up about that. And, if anyone wants to connect with me, please feel free. I would love to do that. I'm so thankful, Rebecca, for having me, and Black Girls Hack. Thank you for having me. It's really an opportunity to share a lot of things that affect us each day as professionals and just people. And that human centric piece is so very important to me. So thank you for having me and allowing me to talk about hacking the emotional IQ. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you and your time. Thank you for everyone for being active participants and putting your listening ears on and engaging and being of support one with another. I also will close with this and say, as we're talking about compassion, make sure that you remember to have compassion for yourself. As people, who care. And I want you to care about everybody because if we all care about each other, then everyone gets cared for, right? But sometimes, as Saber mentioned, having that empathy, it can be emotionally draining. And sometimes it's easier for us to see how we can help others or what others might be going through, but we don't give ourselves the same grace. And I don't know if you can hear me. A singing tenor, I'm preaching to the choir. I also need to do the same. But the more that we, how they say hurt people, well, healed people heal people. So if we take the effort to do what we can to improve ourselves, one, we directly benefit, but then we also, by taking that step, make the world a better place for everyone else as well. So thank you all for your time and for your attendance. I hope you have a fantastic day. I hope you have an even better weekend and that when Monday comes around, you are refreshed and ready to go. And I hope that everything that you endeavor, my mom always says, I pray that you have the godly desires of your heart. So I pray for you all, or I hope for you all, if prayer offends you, that the absolute best outcome that can be achieved for what it is that you are working for and striving for is achieved. I hope that you're all whole. I hope that you're all healthy, and I hope that you're all supported. All right. Have a great day.
Thank you.